everyone. If I haven't met you yet, my name's Rebecca Bradshaw. I'm the producing artistic director here at Gloucester Stage. Aww, thank you. And I'm here to welcome you to another wonderful Fishtails. It's always so electric in the lobby and then in the audience. So thank you so much for coming out and supporting Gloucester Writers Center, but also Gloucester Stage. So thank you. I'm here with the just general theater business. Make sure your cell phones are turned off or anything that beeps or hums. We put in the silent mode, please. We have some great stories tonight. I want to make sure it's not interrupted. On the unlikely case of an emergency, this is a big crowd, so I just want to announce that this part of the audience, this section and this part of the audience, will exit through the way you came, whereas these two sections, there's an emergency exit right off to the right here. So if there's an emergency, just head that way calmly, and we'll meet you on the other side. And there is an intermission about halfway through, and I think that's all I was obligated to say. So thank you so much for being here. I hope to see some of you back this summer for our season ahead. If you need any information about the theater, about what theater we're doing this summer, feel free to find me in the lobby or check out our website. We hope to have you back this summer. So without further ado, I'm here to introduce Henry Farini.
Hello, wow, it's great to have. This is our 10th in a row sold out audience, so thank you. And we're gonna have a recording of it, but unfortunately we had a little technical kerfuffle, and our stream, it may come up later, but it's not running now. But if the show is recorded, so we'll get it out to people who can't get it tonight. So, yes, I'm Henry Farini, and this program started back in February of 2011. It was a winter night, and there were 5 or 6 folks huddled in the Writers' Center, and there to swap stories. And I remember it clearly because one of the storytellers rode his bicycle from Dolliver's Neck through the accumulating snow to 126 East Main Street. Some of you may know who that is. Cut to a year later, and our little Writers' Center with the big pencil was too small to hold everyone. So then board president Maureen Alward decided it was time to move Fishtails into local bars and restaurants. And we did that for a while until Jeff Richon brought us here to the Stage Company, and we've been here for several years now, and we're very happy that it's in a wonderful theater like this. So I wanted to acknowledge a few of the folks who worked behind the scenes to make this program such a huge success. First, Storyteller-in-Residence Nicole Richon Schoel and McArdle for creating thoughtful themes that connect with the local community and the world. Huge thank yous to Layla Goodman, who worked with all of our storytellers to help shape and structure their stories into more effective communication on the stage. I want to thank Blue Cormorant Productions, who brought a lot of is going to edit this piece and is involved in working with the Writers' Center to bring larger audience via the internet to Fishtail. So we're excited about that. And lastly, I want to have a big shout out for Jennifer Brown, who is our behind the scenes producer, who over and over fills the Gloucester Writers' Center with these performances. So, yeah, give it a land. Yeah. So enjoy the evening, and we look forward to seeing you back here again. I'd like to first now introduce our Storytellers-in-Residence, and then they'll come up and say a few words. Co-storyteller-in-residence Anne McArdle left her career in finance to follow her passion for fiction, getting an MFA at the age of 62. She's written fiction, nonfiction, 10-minute plays, and now she's working on a memoir of her early 70s. Her honeymoon turned 3-year ordeal in urban guerrilla-torn Uruguay. And she can be found at the GWC from time to time, teaching various classes and writing workshops. She's tagged up with our storyteller-in-residence, Nicole Richon Schoel, who hails from the People's Republic of Lanesville and has been a community activist for years. She's a fierce advocate of survivors of trauma and abuse and the author of In Harm's Way, which I'm sure many people in here may have seen. It was a great performance. I saw it in Lynn. There are stories of domestic violence of survivors. She's a therapist in private practice, currently co-chairs the Gloucester Coalition for Prevention of Domestic Abuse, and leads Riverstones, a women's writing group at the Gloucester Writers Center. She believes that stories we share deepen our humanity and provide endless avenues for connection to one another. So I'd like to bring those residents up, Nicole. And
thank you, and it's great to see you all here. You're going to have a wonderful night. Thank you for coming to support Fishtails and also the Gloucester Writers Center. Before I begin, I'm thinking about our stories of resistance for tonight. I thought about Marge Piercy's poem, To Be of Use, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. But I wanted to just say a couple of lines because this is how I feel about all of our wonderful storytellers. The people I love the best jump into work head first, harness themselves to the task, and with massive patience do what has to be done again and again, who move in common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire must be put out. So you are in for a beautiful night as you hear the extraordinary stories of resistance, of love and justice in action. And I just will end by saying I would like to dedicate this particular show to the late Jean Gallo, a true resistance warrior who spent her entire, Thank you. She spent her entire life promoting human rights. She talked it and she walked it all over the world, in schools and colleges and monasteries, in Brazil and Cuba and El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and since 1995 here in Gloucester. May we carry her banner forward, and may her memory be a blessing and an inspiration to us all.
So hi, I'm Anne. I just wanted to welcome you as well and thank you for coming. We're in for an amazing night tonight. Our storytellers are actual citizens of the world who have found a way to enrich their own lives by enriching the lives of others. And they're here to share their stories, and we are so grateful to have them here. So, to begin, well, in 1933, FDR said that when people act together, this is the quote part, they can accomplish things which no individual acting alone could even hope to bring about. So, with that in mind, our first storyteller tonight is Niaz Dorry, who has been a community organizer for over 35 years, working on environmental, social, and economic justice issues. A life-changing moment came in '94 when she was at Greenpeace, when she switched from organizing in communities fighting for environmental justice to organizing fishing communities. From the start, she recognized the similarities between these fights, especially that of family farmers who are for a more just and ecologically responsible land-based food system, and of community-based fishermen fighting to fix the broken sea-based food system. She's been serving as the coordinating director of North American Marine Alliance since 2008, One of the first things that alliance did after Niaz took the helm was to join the National Family Farm Coalition as its first non-farming member. The two organizations later entered into an innovative shared leadership model on May 1, 2018, putting Niaz in the new role of serving the work of both organizations and further cementing the relationship and interdependence between land and sea. Please welcome Niaz Dorry.
Well, half of my stories was in the bio, but I'll tell you anyway. So 31 years ago, almost to the day, I flipped a coin that changed the trajectory of my life. I was working at Greenpeace at the time as an organizer, working with communities that were fighting for environmental justice, whether it was a pulp and paper mill or a toxic waste incinerator. And the Oceans Campaign approached me and asked if I would consider organizing around oceans work. And my first thought was, how do you organize fish? You know, they're already in schools. And then I thought the only thing I knew about the oceans work was Save the Whales, which at the time to me felt frivolous because I was dealing with people who couldn't breathe or were fighting literally for their lives. The one story I often tell is walking with a mother and her young child who was about 4 or 5 years old at the time. And as we were walking on the sidewalk, he fell to the floor and he kind of said, "It's not enough air for me today." And I thought, when you're working with folks like that, how can you go save the whales? And I thought to myself, this is not what I can do. And then I began to realize a few days later how ignorant I was. My colleagues in the Ocean Campaign started to feed me stories to read, and one of those stories was a fisherman holding up these signs in protest. And as I was reading the story and looking at those signs, I realized, wow, these could be the signs we were holding up in East Liverpool, Ohio, fighting the incinerator. You could just change a few words, and it was the same fight. The other story was actually about Gloucester. There was a fisherman in the picture. It was a New York Times story, I think, mending his gear in St. Peter's Square. That got me really interested in Gloucester. I'd never been here before. So I started to read a lot about this town, and I realized if I'm going to do this work, maybe that's where I need to go. And it seemed like economically, culturally, historically, politically, it felt like an important place. So I called up a friend of mine and said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to switch campaigns, and I'm going to move to Gloucester. And he said, the first thing we're going to do is teach you how to pronounce the name of the town you're moving to. So that was 31 years ago. And one of the important lessons I learned then was how similar these fights were. Very quickly, I realized this really is beyond the whale or beyond the fish. It's really about global movement of capital. Much like in East Liverpool, Ohio, where we were fighting the incinerator, where people were in the way of global movement of capital. The air was in the way, the water was in the way. And in the fisheries work, the fishermen were in the way, the fishing communities were in the way, the whale was in the way. And so I suddenly realized this is way beyond the whale. This is really a fight that I could wrap my head around. And not only did the work feel familiar, it was almost like a language that you were meant to speak. It felt that familial, but it was also a lot of familiar strategies that I began to recognize between the other work that I had done in the past. I'll share one story about one of those familiar strategies that the other side, so to speak, uses. The incinerator we were fighting in East Liverpool, Ohio, when we look at their documents, they had all these different names. The name of the company was Waste Technologies Incorporated. On one piece of paper, it said WTI, Inc. On another, it said W.T.I, Inc. Anyway, there was a whole bunch of different versions on every document. And we thought, these are all just, typographical errors. It took an investigative journalist from Cleveland Plain Dealer to find out that these were each individual corporations set up by this company as a shell game to avoid responsibility. And so fast forward to 1995 or mid-90s, I was living here. We were working with a group in the community, actually meeting in the basement of the Unitarian Church with Reverend Fitting and Angela Sanfilippo and Al King, Valerie Nelson, Damon Cummings, Steve Parks, a whole bunch of folks working because we found out that there's a factory trawler wanting to come to fight for herring fishery here, fight against the herring fishery here. And then we got 2 pieces of paper one day. One of them was given to us by the mayor's office, and the other, one of the shareholders of the company, leaked it to us. And I was staring at these 2 pieces of paper, and the only thing different was a comma in the names. And I thought, there's something going on here, so I told everybody, I said, these are 2 different companies. And everybody thought, no, it's a typographical error, don't worry about it. So just trust me, I've seen this before. And lo and behold, what do we find? Is that this company that was selling itself as the Gloucester Herring Corporation was actually 95% owned by the Dutch firm of Van der Plas and Parlefleet. So these similarities between these various fights are real. There's a playbook that folks use when they want to come into a community and target a community, whether it's to take over their fishing rights or to take over their clean air and water. And would be wise to set aside our ignorance, in my case, our prejudices, and our assumptions about these fights, that they're all different, because that difference that we're told we have amongst each other is a way to keep us separate, to keep our power separate. And if we set aside those assumptions, look for those through lines in these battles, that's the way that we can build power, because there is a lot of need coming up for resistance. And if we really want to resist, we have to look for those through lines and to build that power that we need to not only resist the incinerator and the factory trawler, but the history that's about to unfold here before us. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you, Niaz. We are all in this together. So next up is Kevin Perrin. Karen lives in beautiful Lanesville now after growing up in Gloucester Center and then living elsewhere during a long career in the military. In retirement, he facilitates the Veterans Writing Group for the Gloucester Writers Center and attends another Gloucester Writers Center group as a member. He's a perennial hostage to gardening. Happiness is fretting over seedlings in the spring, dirt under the fingernails all summer, canning in the fall, and bragging shamelessly while serving delicious homegrown vegetables during the winter. He thanks you all for coming to Fish Tales. And thank you, Kevin. Come on up.
A young female soldier tested positive for cocaine on a random Army drug test, and I was part of a small committee deciding whether or not to kill her. Now, I was a major. I'll explain. I was a major and I had 2 captains with me, so that was the whole committee. There was a trial held, and to be clear, what we were deciding was whether to kill her career, discharge her from the Army, or keep her, retain her, and save her. So we talked about these as kills and saves. Now, unfortunately, she had made just enough rank to be an automatic kill, and all precedent and all protocol was that we killed these soldiers. This was in the early 2000s. So we heard the case. Basically, all she did was she deployed to Iraq for a year. She comes back, her friends throw her a big party. Cocaine happened at some point, and then she got busted on this drug test. I'm sure she learned everything she needed to know as soon as the blood drained from her face when she realized what had happened. So we hear the trial. She's a great soldier. That's what happened. We're in deliberations, and the 2 captains immediately and vehemently started advocating for a kill. I was thinking, these 2 idiots are stuck in the 1950s era reefer madness mindset. So I tried to hint at my feelings by telling them, you 2 idiots are stuck in the 1950s reefer madness mindset. And fortunately, and this is a crazy rule, as the president of the board, I was able to overrule these 2, and I put together a packet for signature for the adjutant general that said, hey, great soldier, give her a second chance. We'll send her to counseling. She'll get more frequent random drug tests and everything like that. So he signed it. We got a save, and I was happy enough with that little blip of joy. I'm just thinking, I hope she stays out of trouble now. But she went on to be a phenomenal soldier. As the years unfolded, she began to win competitions. These are called Best Warrior competitions. They test a number of Army skill sets like medical, communications, everything. Everything an Army soldier would do, land navigation, hiking with rucksacks, and all of that stuff. She was competing against men, and she won the first competition in a unit of 683. Then she won the next one against 3 times that amount. Then she won the state of Massachusetts. So I was delighted. Let's call her Sergeant Vanna. Put her to the side for a minute. 2015 rolls around, and the Secretary of Defense signed a memo allowing women for the first time to be in combat arms units in the military. Now, this went off like a nuclear bomb to all the folks in the combat arms community. And while they were looking at the mushroom cloud, I was reading that memo intently because I knew there was going to be resistance. And I couldn't resist resisting their resistance. I saw it coming a mile away. These were my friends, by the way. If my Gloucester math serves me correctly, as of this year, I've spent half my life in these combat arms, all-male units. Great time, good people, but as you might guess, a largely conservative bent. Might need to be nudged into this century once in a while. So the resistance came, and it sounded like this. Hey, Kev, can you slow down on all this women stuff? What are they going to do for bathrooms? And they'll be banging each other in the ranks. So knowing that I was going to be in the right place at the right time to implement this, I told these guys, well, if we can figure out how to send people halfway around the world to a war and back, train equipment for that, surely we can figure out another place for somebody to piss in the woods. And as for the latter, we ain't stopping that. That's life. Didn't you really mean to say, Kev, what tremendous promotion and advancement opportunities for women across the board here? Let's let Massachusetts lead the way. Good job, Kev. So instead of letting them slow roll it, they could have said, and they wanted to, believe me, let's have our first meeting on this at the safety meeting at the end of the month, and then we'll bump it another month, and we'll bump it another month. And I said, no, you're all going to show up Tuesday with this list and that list, and we're going to have all the human resources personnel there, and we're going to make all these transfers happen that the women really wanted to happen. They've been longing for this. So we did that, and to put the first people in a position, we needed to have an officer and a senior sergeant so that they could be the first ones in a combat arms unit and break ground for all the junior females that would follow them into those positions. The first female sergeant we put in a unit was that Sergeant Vanna that we had saved years before. So she led the way. And I guess what I'd like to say is, if you happen to be in the right place at the right time and something doesn't feel right, it does feel right to resist. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next storyteller is Nancy Henry. Nancy has worked as a child protection attorney, taught public speaking and English writing to Somali immigrants, served as a patients' rights advocate in a psychiatric hospital, and cared for livestock at an organic farm. A slam poet, she has published 3 books of poetry and mentored teen performers. Nancy is a member of River Stones, a women's writing group at the Gloucester Writers' Center. She lives in Gloucester with her husband, her 13 parrots, 2 cats, and a bunch of bullfrogs in the backyard pond. Please welcome Nancy Henry.
When I was 16, I left home to attend college at one of Playboy magazine's top 10 party schools. Now, I still don't understand how my dad didn't see that list. It made me suspect he didn't get that magazine for the articles. Be that as it may, my Republican parents thought that St. Andrew's Presbyterian College would be a safe place to send their 16-year-old daughter to get her tender mind expanded. It just happened that, remember academic freedom, guys? It's fading, but most of the faculty at St. Andrews were veterans either of the Freedom Riders movement, the Vietnam War protests, or the Black Mountain College of Beat Poets. And in those contexts, I know several of them had done time, so I was about to get my tender mind expanded all right. The first day of political science class, us slightly tipsy church kids filed into the classroom expecting the usual arrangement. Neat rows of chairs and a desk at the front of the room. What we found instead was a circle of chairs, and in that circle, an enormous, bushy-haired, bearded man, Dr. Cornelius Bushoven III. "Call me Neil," he said. We were nervous about sitting in that circle, calling our professor by his first name. It felt like a little revolution. Neil began to teach us about American government, about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, about our freedoms and also our obligations, including the obligation to resist when we felt our government was in the wrong. But Neil had another lesson up his sleeve. A few weeks into the semester, we filed into the classroom to discover tidy rows of chairs, a desk at the front of the room. Silently, we sat down, opened our books, but it didn't feel comfortable anymore. It felt like our little revolution was over. Then Neil walked in. "Why are you sitting in rows?" he asked. "What's this desk doing up here? Is this the way you guys want things?" And the light dawned, and we stood, picked up our chairs, moved them back into the circle, and added a chair for Neil. Years later, I was teaching Somali refugees in a community college, and every semester I would arrive early and put those chairs in a circle because I wanted them to know what democracy felt like, what equality should feel like. This past January, after the inauguration, at first I was so paralyzed with shock and horror that I literally got in bed and just pulled the covers over my head. It wasn't long before I realized that probably wasn't a sustainable posture for the next 4 years. So then I was filled with outrage and bewilderment because where were the protesters? Why weren't people pouring into the streets? And I thought about Neil and the circle of chairs. So I made a sign that said, "Silence is complicity." I walked out to Grant's Circle and I stood there alone. And the next day I went back, and the day after that. A few days into my little solo act of resistance, I was getting discouraged. The people whizzing by on the rotary were either just ignoring me or giving me the finger. I don't know if you remember the end of January, but it was darn cold in the 15-mile-per-hour gusts, and I couldn't let go of my sign to give it right back. Not that we recommend that behavior. Just as I was thinking my solo demonstration was not making even a ripple, a young man walked up. He said, "What does your sign mean?" And I told him, "If your government is doing something you think is wrong, and you don't speak out, you're just going along with it. He said thanks and went on his way, but a few minutes later he was back with a cup in each hand, and he said, "This one's coffee, this one's cocoa. I didn't know which you would prefer." His name is Mason. He's 19. We stood there in the snow with the cars whizzing by, drinking our hot drinks, and he told me about his hopes and plans for the future. All that was at stake for him and all the other young people who will inherit our democracy if it survives. I want to honor him for that kind act because Mason reminded me what I was resisting for. After that day, more people came. Some made their own signs and joined me. And I discovered that there were a bunch of us wanting to resist, and we just needed to find one another. I don't know if any of you were driving by Grant Circle yesterday afternoon. Anybody see the big crowd out there? I mean, there must have been at least 100 people out there. The resistance is growing. It feels so good. So I'd like you to indulge me for a moment and close your eyes. Think about the state of our democracy in this country right now. Are the chairs in a circle?
Thank you, Nancy. Actually, I think there were like 300 people at the Rotary, don't you? I mean, somebody said that to me. So. Yeah, oh, it's good to exaggerate, actually. Our next storyteller is Ross Steinborn. Ross came over the bridge to tell us his story tonight. He lives in Beverly, where he helps raise 3 kids with his wonderful wife, and where he works with survivors of domestic violence. He holds a Master's of Divinity from Harvard and believes deeply in the power of stories to heal, challenge, and draw us closer to the world as it should be. Please welcome Ross Steinborn.
Betsy is 20 years old, but she knows more pain than many of us will ever know. And I'm not really sure what came first, if it was the mental health struggles or the alcohol. But I do know that, like many people in Betsy's position, these vulnerabilities, there are always people who will take advantage of these vulnerabilities, who will poke at the pain, who will kind of twist at the trauma. And for Betsy, that person was her boyfriend. And we'll call him, I forget what we're going to call him, Trevor. Betsy had called the police on Trevor and made a report to the police of a domestic assault. And actually, she had gone down to the courthouse and gotten a restraining order, a temporary order. And if you don't know, the way those work is you go in front of a judge, the person being abused, the plaintiff goes in front of a judge with nobody else there and makes their case, and the judge will grant that order for 10 days. And in those 10 days, the police serve the person, the defendant, and then they come back for a 2-party hearing. And that's where I met Betsy, was at that 2-party hearing to know if the judge was going to extend the order for longer than the 10 days. Betsy had lost her child, actually, the father not being in the picture anymore, and the alcohol and mental health. And that was the first thing she told me. And she said it with a kind of flatness, that it was just another thing. But I could tell that it was the only thing consuming her thoughts. These hearings, especially when there's a crime involved, a domestic involved, are pretty quiet affairs. It shouldn't have been that much thrill to it. But Trevor had a plan. His manipulation was very good. See, what he would do is he would buy her alcohol. She was only 20 years old. And he would use that to get her drunk, and then he would poke at the trauma. He would turn the keys to those pains. So the judge, I have a cold, so I knew this was going to happen. The judge didn't see what I saw. The judge didn't see a person with just a veneer of skin over trauma. Didn't see a strong person who was being manipulated. He saw a person who was crazy, throwing things, cursing. He saw a drunk. And so she didn't get the order. Aha. I thought that would be the end, that I wouldn't see Betsy again. But lo and behold, she kept in touch with me. She kept texting me, going to meetings. She was working with DCF on a reunification plan. She was getting sober. And actually, when the DA's office reached out to pursue charges, she was all for the meeting. When the time for the meeting came, I thought like I was going to need to be, she really was going to need me. But she came with so much strength and courage, I couldn't put words to it. I was like shocked. She told the DA's office exactly what Trevor had done, exactly the type of manipulation he had used, all the different times, the threats that he had made, and all of and everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is for the first time ever, or for the first time in a long time, I remember allowing myself to feel a bit of hope. But the wheels of justice turn rather slowly, and time is the enemy of the newly confident. We stopped hearing from Betsy. The text came a little later than normal. And then eventually she became hostile to the DA's office. She decided not to pursue the charges, and the charges were dropped. And I remember being angry or sad, I don't know. Was there a word between those two emotions? But I remember telling myself, it's okay. I would tell anybody who would listen to me, too, it's okay. She was back with her kid, she was sober, she knew this relationship was toxic, that had to count for something. That was in January, and a couple weeks ago I had run into one of the officers that I'd worked with on this case. Betsy was drinking again. She was back with Trevor again. She had lost her kid again. Sorry. I had to pick the sad story. I didn't quite know what to feel when the officer told me that. I kind of wanted to scream, like, what went wrong? How did she fall through the cracks? God. But I think that after reflecting on it some, I think that we often think that resistance is the final victory. You know, I grew up in the 90s, so 90s action films, that was what it was, right? You overcame your oppressor, you overcame whatever was putting you down in a final victory cry. But I think I've learned that it's more complicated than that. Jesus. That resistance is often just surviving. When everything in your bones tells you not to. Oh, Jesus. Should have taken a nap today. That resistance is that call, that voice, to bring on my background, that still small voice that calls us from that place that we are to the place where we should be. Sometimes resistance is as small and it's as enormous as just answering the phone. Because just the other day, Betsy called me, and I answered.
I'm back. So while we're being silly, I just wanted to apologize for my shirt. It's my Get Loud outfit. Okay. I thought I was going to have to apologize to the viewing audience, but I guess that didn't happen, so I won't. Anyway, I meant don't adjust your sets. Anyway, so we're back. We continue these amazing stories. Our next up is David Goudreau. He is retired from an over 30-year career in public health. In retirement, he spends his time wondering why we are here. I'd like to just add to that, we're going to find out why he's here, and we're glad you're here, David. Come on up.
Thank you. So way back in 1982, I graduated from college. I received a BA in film studies, so naturally I got a job working in a group home. I was a 22-year-old closeted gay man. I'm pretty sure my father suspected, but he let me know that being gay was not okay. So basically, I was mostly in the closet until my father died when he was 61 years old. So I was 32 when I finally fully leapt out of the closet. When my father was alive, I would escape off to New York City a few times a year to be gay. It was a lot of fun. And a little, if I'm being honest, and I am being honest, it was hedonistic. It was the early 80s in New York City. And then something happened. It wasn't so much fun anymore. I started hearing about a disease that was killing gay men. The early news reports stated the symptoms were swollen lymph nodes, sores in the mouth, night sweats, among many other symptoms. So I started constantly feeling my neck for swollen lymph nodes, no matter where I was or what I was doing. And then I started getting canker sores, one after another. They just wouldn't stop. Then one morning, I woke up and my bed was soaked. I got up out of bed and I looked at the outline of my body. I knew I had it. But it didn't have a test yet. Those were pretty dark days for me. Basically, I was waiting to get sick, then sicker, then die. I wish I knew at the time that hundreds of thousands of other gay men were going through the same thoughts and feelings that I was going through. But I was isolated and in the closet. In 1985, when the test became available, I went to take it knowing what the outcome would be, but I was wrong. I couldn't believe it was negative. I had a very hard time actually believing that, but it was negative. Apparently, all the symptoms I experienced were due to stress and anxiety about being gay and thinking that I might be HIV positive. So I really felt like I had a second chance at life. And I was hoping to be very productive. And as a matter of fact, 10 years after that, I got a job in HIV prevention, right here in Gloucester on Main Street. We advertised a lot of our services in various newspapers. One of our services was a gay and bi men's discussion group. That way, I could distribute and discuss HIV prevention messages within the group, among other topics. And actually, we once did an outing here to see the Laramie Project over 20 years ago. Yeah. So it was great. So one day, I received a phone call. It was quiet on the other end. And a man started speaking up. Let's call him Bill. Bill was rather hesitant, and he said, he noticed the listing for the Gay and Bi Men's Discussion Group. I talked a little more about the group, and then Bill just blurted out, "I'm gay." And there was a pause, And then he said, "I've never told that to anyone." First of all, I thought that took a lot. That took a lot for him to do that. And I actually felt honored that I was the first one he told. We talked for another 20 minutes or so. And it turns out Bill actually lived out of state and a few hours away. He didn't think it was convenient for him to come to the discussion groups, but I could tell he wanted to talk more. So I took a chance and I just invited him to come down to my office and talk. And he actually showed up the very next day. And it was great. We talked for a very long time. He shared details of his life. I shared a few details of mine. And we also talked about how he's going to get support moving forward. And then he told me when he called the day before, he had the phone in one hand and a gun in the other. He was going to kill himself because he was gay. I'm doing a Ross. But he didn't. He didn't make that decision. He, on probably the darkest day of his life, found the courage to reach out and connect with someone. And fortunately, I felt fortunate that it was me. And then he took further action by traveling over 3 hours just to come and talk with someone in person. And I really feel privileged that I had that conversation with him. It was two people connecting in a very positive way. So I ran the gay and bi men's discussion groups for HIV prevention for quite a few years. And I learned very early on that the men were not coming for the HIV prevention messages. They were coming for connection. They were coming for community. We were gay and bi men who were vulnerable. Some of us were not accepted by family or friends. So we formed our own community in the face of rejection and a deadly disease. But we gathered once a week to be in each other's company because we were stronger together. And I would envision myself, my 22-year-old closeted self, sitting in one of those chairs, finally getting the support and community he needed. And he actually didn't turn out so bad. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Our next storyteller is Maiuza Alves. Maiuza was born and raised in southeastern Brazil. She has lived in Gloucester for over 28 years. Maiuza is a single mother and community activist, a member of the Gloucester Human Rights Commission, and is on the board of the Gloucester Education Foundation. Among other projects, she is currently working with the Board of Health Youth Development Coordinator, not quite I get that right, engaging in Gloucester leadership on a teen center project. And I'm going to quote her here now. "When I see a need within a family or in the community, I step up to advocate and help in the best way I can. If it looks difficult or even impossible, I rise to the challenge, especially when it will help improve people's lives." Please welcome Maiuza Alves.
In 2017, I host a fundraiser to help 3 Brazilian families fighting cancer in Gloucester. That's when I realized part of me never left my home country. In 1996, I left Brazil to come to the country of opportunities. I was 28 years old, single mother, living with my father and my stepmother. on a farm with my 6-year-old boy. That was less than ideal. I worked for the city since I was 18 years old. I was the school secretary. My salary was just enough for the essentials. My only hope was come to America. I took a leave of absence, and I could stay up to 2 years. And I left my son with my sister, and I came to try. A week after I arrived, I started work at a Schoel restaurant as a dishwasher, and then A1 Clean Company, and then North Atlantic Fish. When I realized I was working 80 to 90 hours a week. I slept on was like a foam children chair that you unfold, and it was my bed. My feet was hanging off, and I am 5 feet tall. That was my bed for 6 months. Then I met a guy. I fell in love. I got married. I had another boy, and I had my green card and my son's green card at the same time. I brought him to live with us, and then we were one happy family until we wasn't. My husband was he was struggling with opioid addiction, and I decided to move on. Now I was a single mother again with 15 and 7-year-old sons, and a little bit English. To help me to learn English, I ask every time I need an interpreter, I ask to help me. Let me try first. And soon, my mouth is really dry. Soon I was translated for my friends, and I was in their emergency contact. That time I was already, thank you. That time I was already cleaning the houses for my own. In 2007, and then I asked my clients to help me to get more job. In 2007, I bought my 1,800 square feet condo where I live today. Later on, I was talking to Safatia, and I said to her that we was helping these 3 families fighting cancer at the church. We were trying to help to raise money, but it was not enough. We need to do some, more to help them. And I wanna have a breakfast fundraiser to help to raise more money. And she said to me, set a date and tell me what you need, and you get it. That's what I need to hear. So we put it together, 30 Brazilian volunteers, and we raised $7,500 to help those 3 families. Thank you. Some of those volunteers is up there, and my son's over there. We did that for 2 more years. And so I kept helping the Brazilian community in every way I could. When COVID came, I got my MRC certification. It's a medical reserve corps certification, and it helped the Brazilian house cleaner to get the vaccine. They will be one of the last to get the vaccine, and they need it because they will get into the people's house to clean it, especially the elderly that didn't give up the clean person. And I have been helped the community volunteer in other organizations. I have been work with the KPN Museum with the last three years organizing the Brazilian Independence Day. I helped to with the driver's license bill for immigrants. I have been I am a member of the Human Rights Commission since 2020. I am a board member of the Gloucester Education Foundation, which is I am a happy camper there. Have to do with my background as I work in a school for almost 10 years in Brazil, and now I have a connection. So that day, that breakfast was a turning point in my life. That's when I realized that until then, I was living in survival mode. That day, after that, I had connections. That day, after that day, I was being a whole. I was being myself. I was activist then in Brazil, and then I am activist now. Now I am myself, and this is my happy place. Thank you.
So we're well into the evening with our storytellers, and I don't know about you, but even though I've heard these stories, I just feel really full. They're beautiful, and they're so deep in the heart. Thank you. Our next storyteller is Debbie Stansfield. Debbie, by the way, she has like an entire family section. There, here. A lot of fans. Debbie is a mother and grandmother who likes to read, garden, and dance. She's a member of Riverstones, a women's writing group at the Gloucester Writers Center. She has worked for 24 years at Moore's Way, a residential program in Gloucester for adults in recovery from drugs and alcohol. She works as part of a team to support residents of the Sober House as they engage in the recovery process and gain skills to live alcohol and drug-free. Please welcome Debbie Stansfield.
Whoa! All right. The stories of addicts and alcoholics do not always get a happy ending. I manage a sober house, Moore's Way, right here in Gloucester, where 20 adults in recovery have a safe place to live and an opportunity to learn how to deal with life's ups and downs without using drugs and alcohol. I am a keeper of their stories, and I'd like to share one with you tonight. Boston police got a report that James was very sick and he needed help. They knew the alley where he lived, and they found him curled on his side in his cardboard home. In the hospital, the nurses, when they tried to take his clothes off, some of his skin came off with them. As he was recovering from his illness, he was also detoxing from alcohol. And when it was time to be discharged, he made a decision. He wanted to try and stay sober. So he put himself into many months of treatment, which eventually led him to call me and ask if he could transition into Moore's Way. So we had him come, and he interviewed with myself, my boss, and 3 residents. We all found James to be very likable and sincere. Some of us were worried that he might not be able to do this, but we all wanted to give him a chance, so we voted him in. When he moved in, besides his goal to stay sober, he had 2 other goals. One was to become a productive member of society. And to him, that meant he wanted to get a job. So we went to Action, and he took all the courses that they had to offer at that time, and they helped him find a lot of jobs, all of which he lost for one reason or another. His second goal was to quit smoking, and he tried to do that many times while he was with us, and he failed every time. I never let it get him down. He would say, "I can only slay one dragon at a time." Oh, man. So he had a lot of friends in the house, and one friend in particular, something that they had in common was a very strong desire for a pet. They knew the no pets rule at Moore's Way, but that did not stop them from pestering me. They asked for a cat. I said, no. They asked for a dog. I said, no. They got so they would walk by my office door and they would call out suggestions. What about a pig? No. What about a snake? Definitely no. One afternoon they came in and they said, "Deb, we figured it out. We think that you should let us have a cow because a cow could live in the alleyway." And as my eyebrows raised, they said, "It could give us milk?" I said, no. So those two guys had a really wacky, childlike sense of humor. They began to collect stuffed animals, and they gave each one a name, a backstory, and a personality. One afternoon I was in my office and I'm on the phone with a potential client, and I can hear those two down the hall and they're raising their voices, and I'm starting to worry. I'm listening to both, and I hear, "Get out and don't come back." The next thing I see is a stuffed animal fly by my office door. So in relief, I laughed, and the gentleman on the phone hung up. On another afternoon, James came in my office, and he says, "Deb, I met a girl online. Her name is Janie, and she's in recovery just like me, and she goes to AA, and she's a nurse, and she works in the emergency room." And I said, "Wow, that's awesome. Where does she live?" "Texas." "James, how is this supposed to work?" Well, she came to Gloucester for 1 week to be with James, and a month later she bought him a ticket so he could go to Texas for 1 week to spend some time with her. When he came home, by the time he got home, they were madly in love. So I said, "Well, what's next?" He said, "I'm moving to Texas. But Janie has 2 stipulations. I have to get a job, and I have to quit smoking." So those of us who knew and loved him, myself included, we were worried that it might not turn out well. But it didn't matter because he was going. And as he was leaving, my boss pulled him aside and said, "Listen, if this doesn't work out, you call me and I'll buy you a ticket so you can come home." So we exchanged emails, and with sadness and hope in our hearts, we said our goodbyes. Epilogue. On day 1 in Texas, James quit smoking for good. And his first week, he got a job at Walmart. And 2 decades later, he works there still. Eventually, James and Janie got married and later bought a home. And the very first thing they did after that was adopt a cat and a dog. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. That was great. So our last storyteller tonight is Judy Wright. She is an artist who lived in Lanesville for the last 30 years. She started her resistance career in 1961 by going to Mississippi to participate in the civil rights movement. We are so happy to have her here to share some of that story tonight.
Thanks for coming tonight. So, when I was a teenager, my parents bought me the book, can't think of the name of it right now. But anyway, it was a book about people fighting for something they passionately believed in. And I was so inspired by it that I decided that in my life, I was going to fight for things that I believed in. So it was the 50s, and things were a bit boring. And I lived in a Newton outside of Boston, which was a predominantly white community, and my life was pretty happy and easy. But I already knew that this was not the life that I wanted to live. I wanted my life to be significant. I wanted a chance to fight for what I believed in. So when I went to college in 1961, segregation was in full force in the South. Black people could not go to the same schools as white people. They couldn't go to the same restaurants. They couldn't live in the same neighborhoods. They had to sit in the back of the bus. But most importantly, of course, they couldn't vote. So they had no say in the situation. And then when I was in my last year of college in wait a minute. I started college in 57, not 61. So in my last year of college in 1961, I was absolutely glued to the TV watching stories about the Freedom Riders, going in racially mixed groups on buses through the Deep South to fight against segregation in interstate travel. They were all sitting in the middle of the buses, and the black people, of course, were refusing to sit in the back of the bus. So they were all being arrested, and they were trying to fill the jails to make enough publicity to wake up the country to what was going on in the South. So watching all that, I sort of felt like my time had come, and I went to Atlanta to sign up. So I wasn't too afraid because I was so naive, and also because I was young enough to think I was invulnerable. So anyway, I got on the bus with the people that I was going to be riding in, my small group, interracial group, and we were going to go from Atlanta to Jackson, Mississippi. There was one of the very early buses of Freedom Riders was attacked by white people and set on fire. But luckily everybody got out and nobody was hurt. Shortly after that, there was a bus that went and stopped in Birmingham, Alabama. And when the Freedom Riders got out, they were all really brutally beaten. Luckily, we were much luckier because all we had to deal with was dirty looks from white people. And so we went on our ride, but when we arrived in Jackson, Mississippi, we were all arrested for breach of the peace and sentenced to 4 months at Parchman State Penitentiary. And we had 40 days to appeal our cases, and if we didn't appeal in 40 days, we couldn't appeal at all. So being in jail was a bit rough. The guards hated us because we were trying to change their way of life. We were in 6 by 10 foot cells. Each cell was segregated. This was the women's unit. There were only black people in one cell and only white people in another cell. And when I first got there, my asthma medicine was taken away. They accused me of being a drug addict. And when the doctor finally came to see me, talked to me about it, he said I could have the medication. And I remember seeing the guard coming down the corridor with my asthma medication. I was really so happy. But as soon as the doctor left, the guard took it away again, and I never saw it again. And I also remember sitting in my cell, looking out into the corridor, at a guard standing outside of the cell next to the one I was in, and he was laughing, and I discovered later that he was laughing at a freedom rider who was having a miscarriage in her cell. So that's what the situation was like. But we managed to keep our spirits up, and one of the main ways we did it was every day in the afternoon we had what we called Parchment Hour, where all of us still in our cells would sing freedom songs and tell stories to each other. And every time we did it, we got punished, but we kept on doing it anyway. So I don't know, I can't remember how I happened to get paper and a pen in my cell. I really can't remember how that happened. But I did keep a diary of all my time in that jail, the history of that, everything that happened and how I felt. And I planned to put that in the hem of the skirt I was going to wear home when I left jail. So, yeah, time went by. On the 39th day, just before the 40th day, I appealed out. And then 3 years later, in 1964, I went to Mississippi with my husband, Sib. We worked on helping black people to register to vote and on trying to desegregate public facilities. And at that time in Mississippi, there was only the most tiny, minuscule number of black people that could manage to register to vote. And in one county, where there were equal numbers of black people and white people, there were 3,000 white people registered to vote, and only one black person had been able to do that. The other story I remember from that time, I remember loads of stories, but I can't tell them all. So the other story was the civil rights workers in Meridian at that time were picketing a hotel that did not let black people come in. And so we were all out there holding our signs, walking back and forth, and I saw the police coming, and I felt so terrified. I felt sick, and all I wanted to do was walk away. But I couldn't bring myself to do that in front of all the other civil rights workers and my husband, so I stayed. I was arrested again. Because I was the only white woman on that picket line, I was put in jail alone in the police station. And various policemen would bring their girlfriends up to my cell, and verbally abuse me. They said you only came to the cell so you could sleep with black men. Except they didn't use those words. They used the F word and the N word. And anyway, I didn't stay in jail, luckily, very long there. So what I want to say is I know how bad the racial situation still is in this country, but it's a lot better than what it was then. And if you are as old as I am, you would remember how bad it was. And when I got home from my freedom ride in 1961, my wonderful mother, who always wanted to be helpful, put my clothes in the wash before I had a chance to tell her anything. So my prison diary was just a blur. So that particular piece of history was lost, but I know that the history of the civil rights movement will never be lost, nor will my pride in being part of it. And I just want to say now, whatever your beliefs are, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to write letters to the editor, to be outspoken with people, to talk to your friends about it. Don't be afraid to demonstrate. Don't be afraid to push what you believe, and you may end up doing something you're really proud of. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Judy, for that amazing story. This is where I get a little teary-eyed, Judy's story. Just going to say this quickly. Judy didn't want me to say it, but she has written a memoir about this, and the title is Acts of Resistance, and then there's a Freedom Riders memory of the Civil Rights Movement. If you're interested, you can find it locally. It's fabulous. And okay, so I just want to get everybody up here again, and let's hear a big round of applause for these fabulous storytellers.
And nothing to last. Americone baloney. Americone baloney. Americone baloney. Americone baloney. Big things to break down